Hi, welcome to today's Partner Play, HLS Partner Play. My name is Mike Giannotti, and I'm a Microsoft Technology Specialist working in our Healthcare and Life Sciences division. Today, I'm very excited. We have our Microsoft partner, Innovaccer, and they're going to be talking today about physicians' predictive model development for individuals and patient-specific interventions. Some great content. But before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items that I want to make sure we cover. So let's go ahead and advance our slides here. There we go. This event, as always, is brought to you by the Microsoft Healthcare and Life Sciences Group. You can always visit us at aka.ms/HLS blog. That's aka.ms/HLS blog. And you'll find myself and all my colleagues there with various posts and content, as well as the recording from today's broadcast. Before we start, some housekeeping items that I just want to encourage. Number one, we encourage our attendees to ask questions. So ask, let us know what you're thinking, what kind of questions you have. We'd love to hear from you. Also, all questions are moderated. They're not going to show up to the general audience unless one of us goes ahead and publishes those out. But we will see your questions. We'll be able to respond to you directly, as well as publish those if they're appropriate to do so. Also, we love to know who you are and where you're from. If you want to send us a shout out, we'd love to know, where you're from, state, city, country, etc. And also, as you have questions, again, put those in there in the QA panel. Finally, at the conclusion of this session, as I mentioned, the webcast and its recording will be posted to the Microsoft Healthcare and Life Sciences blog at aka.ms/HLS blog. And we'll do that along with any resources that are mentioned during the webcast. And in fact, Innovaccer has already provided me with some of those to add to the resources, and we'll show you those a little bit. Finally, how to engage the Q&A panel. So in this screen, you can see there is a little dialog box. If you're not already seeing the Q&A panel, you can select that to open or to close things. Once you do so, you'll get a view that looks like this, where you have QA. And as you can see in here, we have all and then my questions. So you'll see your questions directly. And if we publish anyone's, those will show up under all. Down below, you have the option to include your name or not. You also can select to post as anonymous, so that if you don't want to have your name or any information, you can feel free to do so. Again, we still love to hear from you. Just because we don't know necessarily who you are, we still want to know your questions. And that's about it. So we are going to continue on to our presentation. I want to introduce everybody to our special guest from Innovaccer. We have Mike Sutton. And Mike, can you introduce yourself to our audience? Oh, and one thing I almost forgot. Also, tell us where you are coming from today.
Okay. Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on this webcast. I really appreciate it. And I'll start with where I'm coming from today. I live on a boat in San Francisco Bay, so I am staring out at the beautiful Oakland estuary where I have the boat anchored. But my wife, daughter, and I live on a trawler. It's a power boat that we use to go up and down the coast of California. So it's a beautiful day out here in California.
That is very cool. So I think I can confidently say this is the first webcast I've done with somebody. You're actually dialed into our Teams Live event via phone, and first time we've ever had that with somebody presenting. So do you want to kick things off and tell us a little bit about what we're talking about today?
Sure. So for those of you not familiar with Innovaccer, which is probably very few people, because we have been, I would say, over at least the last 6 months, perhaps 9 months, we have been doing a lot of development work and co-marketing, co-selling with the Microsoft health team. So, but what we do, kind of in a nutshell, is we're clinical data specialists, where our products that we've developed over the years, for now over 40 customers, is in the specialty area of being able to ingest data from any clinical and healthcare source. Yeah, and as you're familiar with EMRs, there's many EMRs out there. We brag that we have over 64 EMRs we've connected to. I don't think I can name more than 10. Of course, we have a list with what those all are. We also bring in claims type data, and then where we're progressing and where the industry is going in the healthcare space, non-clinical data. Because as you know, care management, care delivery is only part of your wellness and health. So things like social determinants of health are becoming very interesting. We see a lot of progression, and of course, we're working with you folks on remote patient monitoring. But we bring all this data in and put it in a common, unified data model. Because the issue in healthcare, as you all know, is is so fragmented from a application standpoint. Like I said, 64 EMRs. Well, there are many pharma systems, many lab systems, even more claim systems. And the difficulty in being able to analyze that data and then probably most importantly, get it to the patient and the clinician requires a unification of that data, both the format, and because there's so many systems, deduplication, so that we can present our records around a specific individual and not a collection of so many. So I'm sorry for kind of the long kind of overview, but that is in a nutshell what Innovaccer produces, and we brand that process of bringing it in as our data activation platform.
Very cool. So we have up, right now I have the slide up about your connected care platform and 3 clouds, showing how you're pulling all this. And, as our customers, I know, integration is one of those huge parts, and we're consistently being asked by customers how to bring all their kind of data together, how to set workflows, et cetera, into the whole clinical practice and how people are working, and then surface that in teams, right? Because so many of my customers, that's what they're leveraging is kind of that solution for, sending information. What can you tell us about some of how you're enabling that and the type of scenarios that we're addressing?
Yeah, and I'll start a little more generic than that.
Sure.
Our whole capability and feasibility. So I've been in the business a long time. I mean, I have been doing, kind of data integration back in the days when we had to write our own DBMS, and I even worked for Sybase in the early days. So, but what's happened, I think, and thanks to the work at Microsoft and with the Azure platform, is that the basic capabilities of, and I don't mean basic in a insulting term, but the capabilities of data hosting, be able to handle the volumes of data. Back in the olden days, we used to talk about, a gigabyte being a lot. Now we're talking about terabyte and petabyte type capabilities. But because of the Azure cloud and the services that are available on that cloud, we at Innovaccer don't have to do the muscle work anymore, because that's provided in all these services. So our implementation is in, I like to differentiate, is in the Azure platform. And that's kind of the basics of our data activation platform. I mean, we're using ADLS, we're using Postgres, but we use the common data services that have been defined on Azure. And that's kind of that middle part of that slide that you have up there. And then what we did on the right-hand side is providing the workflows for some of these, is we originally went out and kind of built them with our own workflow capabilities. But now what we're doing, and in fact, we just are, I use a Microsoft term, as having been a customer of Microsoft for so long before I became a partner, is we're engineering ready with a full up native Dynamics implementation for our in-care product, which manages the care workflows for clinicians and providers for patients to make sure that they're getting that full 360-degree care. That is built in Dynamics to the point where we populated our data out of that unified data model into the common data model of Dynamics using, I think you call it the Healthcare Accelerator, which is a bunch of extensions and schemas built in. And it runs fabulously. I think, in fact, we've had a couple of your experts in the healthcare dynamic space take a look at it, and I think I walked out of there with 3 action items, and so, which is good because it really did map, and we were really impressed with the capabilities outside of the workflows we did. As you all know, Dynamics has a lot of other features in it. Contact center, CRM, all those things that we can now take advantage of. That why would we build? And so we're taking advantage of that. And I start with that one because that's kind of been our prioritization, is getting that done. We've also put some of these capabilities in, I think they're called tabs under Teams for some of the distribution for some of our joint customers who are using Teams for their communication. So we really do kind of have a strategy of trying to get on all 3 clouds.
Very cool. So we had a question about the slide. Somebody asked that they see we have or that you have FHIR, FHIR listed, and do you have experience pulling in Cerner data as well as pushing it within Teams?
Yeah, so FHIR is FHIR. It is it's a regulation that HHS has just put into law last March, and so and I think we're working with your Health Next folks who kind of centered their model on FHIR, and and getting some of those real-time aspects of FHIR. So we're fully FHIR compliant. We can take feeds from any of the systems, the EMRs, the lab systems, the patient monitoring systems, and we can do that with FHIR. But what we've seen so far is that the majority of the vendors, let me say that the big vendors like the Epics and you mentioned Cerner, are not fully FHIR compatible yet, where we can pull out in real time that FHIR data. And so what we like to say is we have an integration pattern with the providers and the payers that literally starts at, and believe it or not, there are people still doing paper documentation. And so and it's a very small percentage, don't get me wrong, but our model about how we ingest the data is we can use any source. And our preference is to go to the highest level of source, as you meant, like a FHIR API, but not a lot of those are available today. So we'll definitely do, kind of batch level CCDs, which, and I think that's called CCLF out of Cerner. And we take those files and we ingest them, and then we do a batch process to bring in all that type of data in whichever format it comes in, and we run it through a cleansing process. Because as you might expect, there's all sorts of implementations that have gone on in the industry, and this shouldn't be surprising to anybody, but a record format in Epic and a record format in Cerner, until we get to FHIR, are very different. And in fact, they'll have column names that have the exact same name, but if you get in the content of that data, it's not the same data. And so we do a whole transformation routine and cleansing of that data before we put it into our data model. And then the final step is, because there are multiple records, a person may have visited a Minute clinic, or they may have gone to see their primary care physician that was part of a health system, and they may have been gone to a specialist. Those are all 3 different systems with all 3 different medical record numbers to them in all probability. And so when we bring these data in after we've cleansed it, we then find the unique records. So, if Mike Sutton had those 3 visits, they would find, do the patient matching, and find all those records. So now I do have a complete record about, what my history may or may not have been on those 3 different provider cases.
Very cool. I think that answered it. And then I think you answered the next question we got was, so any source as the APIs become available. And I think, clearly that it's something that's evolving. It's early on, but as they become available, you're able to then ingest and work with those.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I'll just kind of add, I spent 8 years in the travel industry, in the hospitality industry, when the Open Travel Alliance kicked off, and I think it was 1999 or 2000. And I tell everybody, I don't know the last time you ever, where you couldn't book your own travel or take responsibility for your own travel plans. That small start is we agreed on 4 APIs, between us and I worked for the cruise lines, the car companies, the hotels, the airlines. We got together, and all we did was agree on 4 simple, API resources, and it transformed an entire industry. And that's why, we at Innovaccer are so bullish on this interoperability business, and the fact that HHS kind of saw that and got a standard out there that it's probably not perfect. We're on version 4 right now, but I think we can all live with. And so the faster we can get, the source systems to be able to provide these types of APIs, then we can take them, we can ingest them, we all can, and then start using that data. And part of the Innovaccer platform to date has been kind of the interim step, because we don't get those APIs from the transactional systems today, but we fully provide FHIR on the activation side. So a lot of folks are using those APIs to do their own development, for digital transformation about how payers and providers can interact with their customers, whether they're patients or members of their health plan. And that's been available really for a little bit over 3 years now. So as people are waiting for those API resources, we do have them available today, kind of munging through all the sources to make it possible.
Gotcha. Excellent. So moving on from this, did you want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
So we have the Innovaccer platform differentiators on source, ingest, curate, enrich, standardize, prepare, and activate.
Yeah, so I spoke a little bit at a higher level at this is, and this is, for those folks, the data scientist folks, the analytic people, and really kind of the folks doing artificial intelligence, in my experience, has been very frustrating for those folks to be able to get data in a usable format. In fact, I think it's almost universal. When I was at the Central Intelligence Agency, the data scientists I supported there said the same thing. Mike, I spend 70-80% of my time looking for this data. Can't you just make it available?
Right.
And I think I heard the same stories at Kaiser Permanente as well. Is how do you make this data available? And it's one to be available, and then of course this is HIPAA data, so it needs to be protected. So how do we make sure the right people are seeing what they can see? And then thirdly, and it's third, but probably the most important, is how do I make sure the data is accurate? You have cases where, per member per month is a key attribute used in almost every denominator of every calculation we do. And when you look into it, very rarely is that definition the same. So how do we get, all the 3 V's, the 3 V's of volume, variety, veracity, and velocity? How do you get those so that analysts can trust that information? So the slide you see in front of you is kind of our level of curation, and it's a 5-step process where data, we bring in this raw data, whether it's a CSV file or a formatted HL7 file or the FHIR APIs, whatever it may be, we bring it in and we keep the raw data. We keep that because we want to provide lineage. So if there's a result that that someone doesn't believe or doesn't understand, they can always go back and check the veracity of the source data for this L0, for the first level of raw storage. The second level is when it's brought in and we do basic protocol conversion. We do table matching. There's ICD codes, there's SNOMED codes, and we look at the contents of that data, after we've kind of mapped the columns to make sure that, the data, Cerner data and the EPIC data and the ECW data, all that data has been kind of rectified. So at least we're comparing apples to apples. And then we actually, make sure and verify the content of that data. And that's kind of that level 1 process that we go through. And then it gets mapped into our unified data model and also deduplicated there with, with patient matching type capabilities. And then we're running that in a Postgres environment. Postgres is fabulous because it's really fast. So we're getting transaction level speed. So if a data scientist wants to come in there and run SQL queries at that level, they want to write Python code, whatever it may be, they can actually access kind of that core data with all the details in it, as well as have access into the raw if they want to pull those results. And then, so once the data, now we have this data in a unified data model, it's trustworthy data, and we want to make it available. So there's a process of converting it and putting it in the FHIR format and accessible through APIs, which our main customers there are folks that are writing applications. And as I'm sure you're all aware, and you've heard that, the developers have the same issue finding data that they can depend on to write their code. And so this shaves weeks and months off of development efforts because now they have a API level interaction with this healthcare data that is well documented. It's in the FHIR format, and they can develop at will. And in fact, our applications that we've written have been developed using these same APIs. And then the other level of curation is putting it into the Power App type capabilities. So people, the more the business analyst types, can come in through Power BI and assess that. And that's all off the shelf, available, and available to you. So that's kind of sorry for all the details, but that's kind of the guts of the levels of curation. And what many people like is the ability to go at it at whatever level of detail they're most comfortable with
right.
APIs, SQL. You want to rummage through the raw data, that's up to you as well.
Yeah, great. We had, kind of as a follow-up, and you mentioned briefly, we had a question asking about examples of activation, and they said specifically apps, et cetera. Like any kind of applications that you can call out or examples of where you're actually taking that data then and activating it and making it available.
So much of our early market development was selling our applications. So that's the care management application. There's the InNode application, which is a clever way of getting onto the EMR. It's a little slider that sits on top of any EMR, but and it puts actions in front of the physician. And in every one of our implementations, we implement the data activation platform. So it is used by all of our applications. And I would say I've been at Innovaccer now for a year, and I would say the majority of customers that the innovative customers that have been part of the Innovaccer, kind of solution area have been using the applications. But then the very, kind of fortunate follow on to that, they go, well, you've consolidated all this data in this data activation platform. Can I use it for other things besides population health and value-based care? And so we're seeing a lot now where actually that DAP becomes the basis of their clinical data lake. And we're seeing that evolve in more and more of our customers as they get more familiar with how that data is used. So I'm not 100% sure I answered your question there, but
I think so. They were asking specifically about the app, so I'm going to assume that that's what it was. But I did see we had a follow-up question. I'm just publishing that out right now to the publish so everybody can see it. And I see somebody asked, or no, they made a comment that they like that you have some ready-made applications plus the ability to create, custom ones leveraging this. And I think that's probably a key differentiator, right? You're both providing application and now this something that's in a readily consumable format that they can leverage in their own homegrown type apps.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I find it very hard to sell kind of infrastructure and a data lake. Like I had the responsibility. I worked on the replication server at Sybase.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you talk about a boring demo. It's incredibly sophisticated technology, but to be able to demo this is very hard. And so what's really quite fabulous is that people can visualize, and especially in the healthcare environment, can see where if I can do this type of analysis, and a lot of our dashboards have been very, very useful for managing risk and determining risk, and kind of doing the customer service piece for patients and members, that they can actually visualize this, and then now it really, really helps the sale of the whole platform, because they can envision and see where their value levers are and where they can start reducing risk, saving money, or improving customer satisfaction. And without the apps, that it's almost impossible. And then now that we're kind of getting in a place where we're available with Dynamics and to a certain extent Teams, and certainly Power BI, which we've supported for a long time, is you can put users in the driver's seat of these applications and see the power of the platform and this unified data, which is so elusive in the healthcare space.
Excellent. Well, the one thing, and I guess this kind of follows up on that, and I'm going to add to their question. They said, is there an additional expense for the SDK? But is there parameter, I guess on my follow-up, are there parameters around where and how you can use the SDK? Is that just something, they're able, that do they license it? Is it freely available once they're using your service? And how does that all play out?
So I'll kind of start with what the typical model is. So we have a couple of our customers actually buy the data activation platform without any application, which is 100% fine, because the applications are all a la carte. They
Gotcha.
get added. People want them. They add them. We're a managed service, by the way. I didn't mention that part. Where not only do we install this on the Azure environment, inside the subscription of the customer or on our subscription, it doesn't really matter. We see a big trend towards being within the customer's subscription. And and what we do there is on the DAP part, that's kind of just the getting started part, and then we add on each of the applications as people see fit. But we manage that DAP as a subscription, or as a managed service, so that if we had one customer say where we displaced a competitor of ours, and said the feed was down for 3 months, nobody knew, and we manage that service, with managing the quality as part of that service. And then what they do is they take advantage of the SDKs like you're talking about, and there's a couple there. And so I won't talk about the apps specifically, but there's of course, when the APIs, or if you get the API package, we have an API sandbox that's on Innovaccer.com, where people can go in and actually start prototyping apps, and that's totally free, totally part of getting the DAP installed in your environment. And so people can start building the code even before the thing is populated. But the other one that there is part of our in-graph product, and it's called Measure Builder. And this is more for the analysts that want to build their own dashboard. And I think there is a subscription cost to that. You have to pay for that extra. But that's very popular as well because we have a whole bunch of pre-built dashboards and calculators like, Benita's results and all those types of things come in out of the box. But we find a lot of people, particularly the data science people, that use I guess I would call it a dashboard SDK. So I think that kind of goes after the question. But the SDKs, except for Measure Builder, I think come with the package that you buy.
Oh, excellent. I don't see any further questions on this piece. Did you want to move on to the architectural one?
Sure.
And there we go. So we're on the architecture streaming data, and that's got, wow, I'm seeing all kinds of services that you're securing and managing and pulling in.
Yeah, and this will go back a little bit to the prior, the prior point that I made, that we take full advantage of, the 3 clouds that have been provided by Microsoft. The ability to secure the data and keep it private and role-based access and all those controls are things that we inherit from the platform that you all have put out there. And again, we build kind of within those. We don't do virtual machines. We're not doing IaaS. We are building within those services capabilities you have. And also take advantage as your services, as your service becomes available, is, you do the HIPAA compliance, the HIPAA certification. So, we can then use those, and then we get our certification and our BAA. You've taken advantage of the services that you guys have really done all the hard work for, and make it available. And I don't really have anything. I think I talked about most of this. I'm sorry, this is a slightly, detailed slide.
No, we actually just got a question if you're going to have this slide available after the presentation. So I think it kind of takes what you have been talking about and really visualizes it.
Yeah, and this is, this slide is, we're, like I mentioned earlier, we're working with, your sales teams, your data and AI team. We're working with your Health Next folks, and so this is a kind of a common thing that we've put together, all with the sponsorship of, the partnership group, at Microsoft. So yeah, this is there's nothing secret here. And in fact, the more, as the Microsoft Health Cloud, becomes more and more mature, we see these pieces mapping into that, and we don't have that one today. But we feel as if we're a central part of a lot of those capabilities that are evolving in the Health Cloud, the Microsoft Health Cloud, and the capabilities that we jointly market and put together.
So on my end, I guess I'll ask in lieu for my customers, but if customers are interested in seeing, again, some of the examples of this, if they want to engage with Innovaccer, one, I guess, who would be the departments or groups that typically you would look to meet with to look at opportunities to work together and partner together to bring stuff bring these kind of solutions into an org? And where can they see and get more information about this for follow-up?
So, I'll kind of start with where Innovaccer started 5 years ago. When we were, a couple hundred people. Now we're pushing 700. So the initial clients and the people who bought it were like I mentioned before, were the folks interested in the application. So these were like, chief medical officers, huge proponents of the platform. They love the details that they get to see. They love the 360 view. Clinicians, people forming, accountable care organizations, CINs, population health type things. And we're seeing, I think of one of the many lessons that kind of came out of COVID, and many of the folks I talk to in our customer space is, I think the providers are more interested now in, running in capitated models where, they are willing to take on some risk. And so those people are first and foremost, especially as the whole value-based care, initiative goes more and more, especially in the Medicare and Medicaid space. So I think that's a primary and I won't say easy sale, but because I think every sale folks both at Innovaccer and Microsoft are fabulous. But I think that's a very open invitation for folks to get into. And then kind of secondly, what we're seeing in the market, and this is going after in more the payer space, but the CMS regulation has driven a number of RFPs and RFIs coming out to produce APIs. And even at Kaiser Permanente, which is fairly mature from an IT standpoint, we did not have all the FHIR APIs ready either. So I think, and the deadline's looming on that. So in that particular case, I think we're looking into the folks in the IT department. Maybe not the CIO, but for sure there's people that have interoperability responsibilities. And I think that's a great place in payers to start talking about. And then those folks also have a great purview that they're worried about an enterprise, I use the word data lake. I'm not sure if that's the best descriptor, but they're also not worried about not only solving the API problem, but kind of very few of them have what's the right word? A mature architecture around their data analytics and data lake, and particularly in the cloud. So I think that's a good kind of second avenue. And then I think thirdly is going directly into like the chief data officer and the analytics space in our customers, is that they have a huge issue of being able to produce the reporting that they need to do, the analytics they need to do, and we've had some brought on by your folks. In fact, we've had introductions to major organizations, chief data officers, or their head of analytics, and I think those folks, we talked about that the 5 levels of curation. They want to go into gory detail on that. I found those to be very satisfying. Not to mention intellectually challenging situations about how data gets managed. So I think maybe those are kind of the major groups that we're looking for, for audiences with in organizations.
Oh, that's perfect. We did have a follow-up question, and I think they must have been reading your mind when you put together some of the content. They asked if you have any customer references that you can provide, or that reference to, that are using your solutions today.
So I think, Mike, that is the next slide.
I was laughing. I saw that. That's perfect timing.
I have to be careful here because I'm not 100% sure who's referenceable and not referenceable. But what I can say is that slide that I presume you're popping up is the list of well over 40 customers. And as you can see, our legacy is in the provider space. And there's a kind of that middle category of providers who've started, health plans and ACOs that have, small plans, and then at the very top is, legitimate, health plans, health insurance companies, which are certainly a very evolving space, based on kind of that earlier conversation about their need to solve this interoperability problem.
No, absolutely. And, definitely these are some easily recognizable names. In fact, a number of them that I work with. So that's always great to see. And, and plus we're seeing it across provider, payer, and life sciences, which is great.
Yeah. And, and I found it very, I think as you mentioned, there's many cases where we have the same customers. And I have found the synergy of getting with the account team in those customers, because in many cases you're competing against the other cloud providers and other folks that we don't necessarily compete with, but we can actually be an edge on some of those. And so I found sharing that information, whether it's something that we can act on or not, I've really enjoyed the interaction really across the country in a lot of these joint accounts we have.
Absolutely. And I think the last slide that you have, I think, is a kind of a great wrap up, because you were talking about how you can connect with all these different systems. But then, one of the things I love about Microsoft is we have moved away from being a Microsoft only world, right? And I started 20 years ago here, and I remember the days when if you talked about, anybody who was a quote unquote competitor, might be walked out the door. And under Satya and the cloud, that's all changed, right? Because we recognize there are so many other solutions and providers and different things that we now co-petitate, right? That's what I call it. We cooperate and we compete. But it's great to see that you have, and I'm going to bring that up, that you are actively partnering, not just with us, but with many others to be able to provide the kind of solutions that you are.
Yeah, and that's, we keep our sights on, it really is about improving, membership and patient care, and that whole piece, because our healthcare system is, so fragmented. It doesn't make any sense that the technology providers in that same industry be as fragmented. So, things like, we're, for our social determinants of health and community interaction, we've teamed up with Aunt Bertha, as a partner. But there's other providers out there too. Sometimes the customers, like Unitas is a pretty popular, community interaction team. We'll interact with them as well. But then that's, preaching to the choir. But that's the beauty of APIs is, we can now move this data with a level of security and privacy that was never available, really even 2 or 3 years ago. And, APIs they're specific and succinct, and you can control them. And so the whole security exposure goes down, as opposed to what we used to do is we bundle up a big ASCII file and send it across the internet, and hopefully it was encrypted, but maybe not. And that just created a huge security exposure. So,
sure.
So not only is the new world that we're moving to, this interoperability, kind of great for everybody, because we can cooperate, or I'm not sure the term you use, but it's also
co-petitate.
We're going to co-petitate. Yeah, it's also incredibly more secure and private for the member, and as well gives the member actually control of their own data. The whole goal of democratizing this information is, seemed like a goal that was so far away, but it just seems to get closer and closer.
No, that's great. And I know when I go in, it's funny, when I go in with customers, they're like, well, but we also use, I don't even know if I can say it with you. And I'm like, no, is it Google? Are you using AWS? Are you using, it's okay. We get it. It's a new world. And we all have to work together, right? So
right.
I don't see any other questions. I did, however, was given a link, and we'll provide these after. So I'm putting them up, where you have out there a research paper on how data platforms transform healthcare for tomorrow. There's 2 PDFs. Am I looking at the right?
Yeah, it'd be great. We wrote these as part of, kind of a little about what we just talked about.
Yeah.
What I just spoke about how, us mild-mannered, meek technologists can help transform an industry that is in great need of this transformation. And we've documented some of these in the white papers, and how,
excellent,
kind of how the standardization of the information is really about the patient, and how we can truly put them in charge of their own health, with a fabulous, clinical capability that we have in this country. I've always, told my doctor friends, it's not about the practice of medicine. Doctors they're fabulous. They're fabulous people. It's the business of medicine that's the problem. And so, right. I think we just just like the banking industry transformed, the healthcare or the travel hospitality business transformed, we're on the precipice for it happening in the healthcare space. And no longer is technology and kind of data access going to be the constraint. It's that's a bit Pollyanna, but we really are positioned to make that happen.
No, that's excellent. So we'll definitely, I'm going to put the links then to these, but I guess I had a comment. Somebody said, thank you very much, or thank you, has been very informative. But, if there's any last things, if people want to get in touch with Innovaccer, if they're looking to find out more, certainly we'll give the links to this and to your website. Anything else that they should be doing to, initiate a conversation to move forward with you?
Well, I'd encourage the account teams to get together, even if there's not a pending RFI or RFP. But I think just understanding Microsoft's such a force in the healthcare space, and those account teams just touching base with the account rep from Innovaccer. I think really just spontaneous innovation could happen from that, just kind of talking and ideas popping up, because I think there are, especially because it's really quite fabulous seeing all the innovators in the customer spaces these days in both the payers and providers and pharma. I spend a lot of my time going around talking to these folks, the CIOs and the chief analytics people, and we're just talking about the possibilities of things that can happen and what's that next generation look like. And I think there's a lot of innovation that we could help lead in our partnership with our with some of these innovative customers that we jointly have.
No, I agree. So I think that's it for today. This has been great. Certainly I can tell you one of the things, because I learned a lot today about what you do. And I'm sure, it'd be great to have not only our customers getting more engaged, and it's great to see some of the customers that you're already engaging with, but getting our account teams to get you involved, because these are the kind of conversations that we're having increasingly as we're moving out of it was that fury time in COVID where people were just trying to, stay above water. But now they're really trying to say, okay, now that we've got some of these baseline, to your point earlier, base systems, right? It's a basic piece here in Teams or something. How do I now light up and start to pull these other pieces together, add those additional applications as tabs and other things to provide that full experience and that end-to-end kind of involvement from this platform we've introduced and we're leveraging, but now we need to move beyond just basic communications.
Yeah, and I just kind of add on to that, once we have the EMRs digitized, we have the Teams capability, the Dynamics capability, is what now, kind of the big talk about AI and all that, that's where, we can let, scientists just evolve the space that, we've never seen before. So I agree, Mike.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Well, I want to thank you, Mike. This has been great. And again, coming from a boat, I think that's awesome. Never had, you've inspired me. I got to figure out how to get a good enough connectivity to do a webcast from the lake here.
Yeah, well, webcast at sea. So I appreciate the opportunity, Mike. As usual, I love talking to you folks at Microsoft, and it's been great meeting you.
Same here. Well, to everybody who tuned in today, I want to thank you for joining us. Stay tuned. As I mentioned, if you go to aka.ms/HLS blog, that's aka.ms/HLS blog, we will have the recording later, hopefully later this afternoon. At the latest, it would be tomorrow morning, but we'll have the recording, the resource links out to these white papers here. We also have an additional link that was provided for the architectural diagram, and we'll have a link right to Innovaccer. So thank you for myself, for Mike, and for those who joined us today. Have a great day and take care. Bye now.